experience powerlessness in the abuse, in the justice system, in the processes and decisions that follow. 500,000 children and adolescents experience CSA, child sexual abuse, each year. Experiences of being silenced, minimised and disbelieved are all too familiar to young people, as we've heard from Poppy's experience, and also considering those who care about them. This panel will explore the nature and the role of voice groups as what might be described as an antidote to the individual and collective disempowerment experienced by survivors and their families. We will examine work that's taking place in context, looking at how voice work might enable systems change and personal growth. We will show that voice work takes many forms. For example, we include experiences of self-advocacy and consider how voice groups might enable more young people to be able to do this and feel supported to do this. I'm now going to invite my panel members to join me, if that's okay. The panel has expressed a wish for sharing tools and practices to stimulate thinking and instill a hopeful message for you today as our audience. We want that message to be built around recognizing that if all services could tap into these tools and practices, no matter how big or small, and could lift up all the young voices and those that care about them, how powerful that would be. So now I'm going to invite, starting with yourself, Ali, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, good morning. My name's Ali. I have been at the greenhouse I came to the greenhouse to set up the Voice Project in September 2021, and I'm now one of 2 voice coordinators based there.
Hi, I'm Poppy. I'm part of the Beyond Therapy Shapers group, and I'm part of YRAP, which is the Young Research Advisory Panel, and I'm speaking from experience.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, and I'm also part of the Beyond Therapy Shapers, and I'm here to talk about self-advocacy as a form of voice work.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm one of the proud members of the Parent Voice Group at the Greenhouse.
Thank you. So just to give you a sense about what the format for the session will be, I'm going to be firing loads of questions at these guys, and they're going to be sharing all their fabulous experience with you. We will be hearing all about different examples of voice work, and we have a lot to cover. So I'm just asking for permission now to move things along as I'm keeping a very close eye on the clock, so I will need to ask people to move along if we're running short of time. We would like just to remind people to feel free to come and go as you please throughout the hour or so. In fact, I think we'll be here until 12:30, and we will have time for questions and comments towards the end, but you're also welcome to add questions using the Mentimeter when the opportunity arises. Is it there already? No, it'll come in a little while, and we will also invite you to come and talk to the team afterwards, or to the stand, the Beyond Therapy stand that I believe is out in the corridor, if you'd like to ask some more questions, or get in touch with the greenhouse afterwards. Okay, so without further ado, we are right on schedule, everyone. This is great. So we're going to start by asking, what do we mean by voice work?
So for me, voice work is not just about voice. I think there's loads of different things that can make it up, sort of seen things like going to a group, being part of a panel, which is quite scary, and lots of unseen things like opportunities to share your views in surveys and things like that. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's very much about trying to make change and pooling all of our knowledge together to try and produce something to make a difference. So it's great to share your thoughts, but to actually do something with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think me and Kate, or my mother, if you haven't worked out by now, have very similar ideas. So if I repeat something, So I think as well as pooling knowledge together and forming it into groups, I think it's really important to do it in an individual level as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, about how we can make that happen. It's important to then turn that feedback that they received into action, because without that, effectively, it's null and void. And then a quote that I think we always say, I can't remember where we got it from, but it's those with the ability have the responsibility.
For me, it's about creating a place to put this anger and this passion and turning it from something terrible into something quite amazing, something I can see and be proud of. And I personally do that within a voice group work. which can be beneficial in like a community sense, meeting people, and also get some like larger scale influence.
Lovely. Thank you. And Ali, all the way down there, can you tell us a little bit about the aims or the goals of voice work at the greenhouse and how it might be different from therapy or support groups?
Yeah, sure. So we sometimes say there are like 3 main aims of what we're trying to do in our voice work. So one of them is creating opportunities for agency and action. So, you know, so many people who come to us have this feeling of being done to, both in the abuse but also often by services. So the opportunity to do, whether that's creating something or speaking out about something, whether individually or collectively, those opportunities for agency. The second one is about challenging silence and stigma. So as we know, there's so much stigma around this issue in the world, often in ourselves, certainly in other services. There can be this sort of avoidance and awkwardness. So trying to really be part of shifting that in the culture, shifting that in ourselves as individuals, as communities. And the third thing is about improving services. So the idea that we as the greenhouse could provide the best possible support service without listening to people with lived experience about what they really want and need is crazy, isn't it? And yet we see lots of services operating like that. So those are the 3 main aims. And I guess in terms of how it's different, in one way I'd say that voice, we try and have voice kind of infusing everything about how we work. So if somebody's a therapist, they're obviously really trying to hear what somebody wants and needs and respond to that. I guess what makes our groups and our voice interventions a bit different from therapy and support groups is that the sort of primary aim is about amplifying voice and about making change. And that can be really, really small change, or that can be really big systems change. And like Kate, you already said, that can look like lots of different things. So we have group projects, we have kind of ongoing monthly groups, we have time-bound short groups, we have one-off sessions where people come together and do a creative activity or join a protest. And later on we're going to have some images rolling, so you'll get a little taste of some of those. But it can also be things like contributing to our newsletter, which goes out to a big community of, I think, 340 young people and families. It could be sharing a poem that gets shared at an event like today. So it's sort of a spectrum of participation, if you like, where hopefully there's something for everybody.
Okay, thank you. What is the catalyst for voice work? Thinking about what produces the need for survivor involvement, co-production, and other devices for amplifying survivors' voice. What produces this need in the first place? Madeline, thoughts on that?
I think it's really unfortunate that even though we have a very small selection of survivors on this panel, that any survivor could sit up here and tell you a story about why voice work is important and why and how they've been wronged in the legal process. My example is effectively there was inadequate risk assessments from offender management team, youth offending team, and the educational setting. And it basically led to a massive safety concern to me and my family post-release. And he was placed in an institution less than a mile from my house. To further this, it's not having a survivor-led mindset leads to insensitive interactions between the services and the survivors' families. So I remember being told, we asked a question saying, since he's so close to my house and my family, if I accidentally see him in the street and freak out, what happens if I disclose some information? And the officer said to me that you'll feel the long arm of the law at 14 years old. That stuck with me, and I think that's pretty disgusting. When issues were then raised about that and the whole process itself, it went down very long, complicated complaints processes when all we were trying to do was say, look, we can't change what's been done, but let's change it for the next person. And it just highlights the gap between services with almost like untested plans, and they're designed to make people in the community feel safe, and they just completely failed to do that, which I think highlights that gap even more.
Thank you, Madeline. Anybody else like to come in on that one?
Do you want me to go? Yeah, I mean, for me, the kind of the catalyst for the voice work was Post-disclosure, feeling a huge sense of overwhelm, complete isolation, horrendous parent guilt, trying to spin all the plates together when everything's kind of crashing down around your ears, and just there being no guide, no roadmap, no help, no somebody sitting you down with all these services and all these people kind of coming through your door, or you taking, you having to go somewhere. Nobody kind of taking a step back and saying, it's okay, this is normal, or, something to kind of guide you through that process, because in the aftermath of disclosure, you just you're not capable of retaining anything productive or practical for the most part. So for me, it was very much around wanting to create something to leave it in a less rubbish place than when we found it. So,
You've used the word legacy. It's very apt.
Yeah, and I think later on we'll see some, that's where the kind of the parent handbook came from. It was pooling all of our collective knowledge to kind of go, well, this is the experience that we had, and other parents and carers maybe had a different experience, but between us all, we've probably covered a lot of the bases, and to somebody else that comes behind you, to be able to give them that wisdom kind of felt like a really good way to make something positive out of something really awful.
Sure. Any other comments on that? Okay. So just to finish up on that point, or that question, I think it's important to highlight that sexual abuse, rape, sexual assault and exploitation are all too often met with disbelief, shame and silencing, and the use of voice is a counter response to the harms, the stigma and the inertia of organisations and institutions. It's also vital as a mainstay. So even if all those systems are working really well and we're listening, I think it's vital that it is a mainstay for working with trauma in any setting or context. And the involvement of people with lived experience in decision making is at least recognised as a principle of trauma competent practice and systems. But putting that into practice seems to be very poorly done. But it's hard and it's not done well. So now let's take a look at voice in practice. So this is an opportunity for you to share a little bit more about all those wonderful examples of the work you've been doing as part of the greenhouse and external to the greenhouse as well. We'll be exploring what voice work achieves. This will allow us to touch on several examples. As I've said, we will have these visually represented on the screen behind us, and we will be looking at the individual and direct positive benefits and effects of participation for members of voice groups. So that's one element, this sort of looking at personal growth and so on. And then we also want to look beyond the group itself, beyond the individuals within the group, pathways to and evidence of systems change and better outcomes for other children and young people and their supporters. Could I start with you, Poppy?
Yeah.
Talk to us about community.
So being part of voice groups was really helpful for me, and it was kind of refreshing to be surrounded by people that kind of just get it, is how I would describe it. Because a lot of peers within school, they sort of make jokes and they don't really understand the extent of it. And to be with people that have had similar experiences and can kind of understand the emotions that go along with it, it has really helped to feel less isolated, because that can come a lot with sexual violence. I was part of the 3-week Boiling Wells with the Greenhouse. That's where I met Ula and a lot of other people. And although we didn't directly talk about why we were there or anything around it, it was just a safe place. And I also was obviously part of the film designing. There was 3 of us in the group. And that was kind of just a place to put it, a place to just put what I was feeling into something and kind of direct that anger towards services and how they treated me and get it out there. It's a way of like keeping it moving instead of being stagnant. And the more I listen to it, or like the more I say it, it gets easier every time, and then there's less shame around it. And also obviously meeting the people and growing with people was a really helpful thing with that group as well.
Thank you, Poppy. Thank you for sharing about that, and so eloquently. Well done. One of the core values of the Greenhouse is to embrace creativity. And I was here last year. I think I was in the same seat, actually, or maybe a few behind. I was over there. And one young person stood up and told a poem drawing on their personal experience, and I believe that was you, Madeline. And I was extremely moved. It was, I said to you recently, it was a real turning point in my understanding and informing my research work. Very special moment. Could you comment on the connections between creativity and healing in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, initially I didn't have a drive for the poem, and I think that's totally okay. If you just sit down all I did is sit down with a pen and paper, right, and just start writing. And when I delivered that poem last year, it was completely unedited, it was raw, it was exactly how I wrote it in the moment. And I think that's when creativity and poetry and art carries a most important message, because it's raw. It's exactly how you feel, and no one else can tell you that it's wrong. And I feel like, especially with poetry, you've got language and form and structure and silence and all these tools in your arsenal to play with to create something that you want to create, not for anyone else. And if you want to go share that, that's amazing, and that's what I decided to do. But even if it's just for you and as a way of documenting your feelings, it's one of the best methods that I find, is just sitting down and writing. And anyone can be a writer. I did a poetry workshop recently with Claire, who said anyone can be a writer, you just need to start writing. So that kind of stuck with me as well, which is ironic, you know. Yeah.
Excellent. And what about your experience of being part of the Beyond Therapy Shapers group this year? I guess that's more about finding joy and an outlet in a collective activity that has a focused, endpoint. Can you maybe speak to the effect of that on you and healing?
Yeah, if I could summarise it, I guess it's similar to what both of you two were saying. It's like being in a room with people who have been through similar things as you means that there's just this unspoken, mutual, I get what you're going through to some extent. And the direction of the Shapers group this year was to really bring all this together. I think having that direction means it's healing, because you're helping other people. That's just might be a personal thing to me, but I heal and, move on from this horrible experience from making the person behind me's journey less crap, effectively.
Thank you. Okay, Kate, what about any benefits of sharing and supporting a space with and for other parents?
Well, the girls have actually summarised a lot of what I would have said. I think as a starting point, it came from feeling quite angry and wanting to tell services and people that was not okay, or actually it was all right, but we can do better than all right. And I think along the way, kind of spending time with the other parents, you kind of find a purpose. Yes. And it's when you're feeling quite lost and overwhelmed, to have that focus is really productive. You find community. We laugh so much, and in the silence and the depression and the awfulness, to laugh is a real gift.
Yes.
And you can do it without guilt, because they know, and they don't feel guilty about laughing, and you can find support, or you can support others, and that in itself is really cathartic, to tell your story, to use it, and to support other people along the way, to help them. You don't know everything about their journey, but what you can say is, we've encountered something similar. Have you thought about it from this perspective? And, just kind of sharing that and challenging each other and helping each other, has been, I think, one of the biggest gifts, is to bring people together. And that's like a real counteract to the stigma and the isolation.
Can I ask you a question that's a little off script?
Oh, don't go off script.
How do you negotiate going into other spaces then where you may not have that freedom to be able to express?
It's really difficult. It's really challenging. From my day-to-day life, my job, I'm very, very guarded and very quiet on it, because I have to be. It's just the way it is. So it's a real release to come into a space where you can just be without expectation, without fear that somebody's going to. But if I was saying that it's easy to come up on this stage and look at all your faces and kind of think it's easy, it's not. It's terrifying, to kind of do that. But it's important, and it takes a great deal of energy to be masked all the time. A great deal of energy. So that's where the healing comes in, is that you can just sit with whatever it is today that you're feeling, and that's okay.
Okay, thank you. So we've taken a look at some of the really important individual impacts then for our participants from the various activities, the various voice activities that they've been involved in. I know, Ali, you're so passionate about the change making, the activism element, and we're going to take a look at that. Let's start with taking action within the service. So let's look at examples of where there have been changes within the greenhouse as a result of feedback, understanding, insights coming through from the voice work. Kate, you're back on my list. Unless we want to give Kate a break. Would anyone else like to come in, or will we stick with it? Are you ready to go?
I'm good to go.
Okay,
It's
all
fine,
right.
it's fine. So I do think I spoke earlier about the parent handbook and where that idea came from, and you know, at the point Ali came on board, I mean, bless her, it is like trying to herd cats when we're in a room together. We talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and she has an agenda. We never stick to it.
That's not just a parent thing. That's not just a parent thing. That's the same with our group as well.
So there's so much going on.
We get there.
We do, and I think it's really interesting that you kind of take this one thing and then you kind of get the drive to do something else with it, and it's like, okay, I've seen them. I've seen the handbooks in the wild. I've seen them out there, and you know, that's a real kind of a really, really lovely feeling, because you kind of whisper it to yourself and go, I did some of that. Yes. You know, you can't say it out loud because you're in public and we don't do that. But, you know, and then it grows arms and legs, and you kind of want to find ways to reach more families and pass that gift on to them, the feeling of community. And we tried lots of things. I think that we tried family connection days at the Adventure Playground, hoping that people would bring their young people and just kind of find that space. And that varied success, but I think from that is where the greenhouse then kind of talked to a lot of parents, not just the noisy ones that like to come to the groups, and evolved that into the nature-based. I think that's where you ended up with that, isn't it? It kind of the nature-based drop-in, and I've not been, I don't like being outside, but you know, you go.
Yeah, that's right. You might see the poster for it coming up. Yeah. And that's it's sort of slowly built. So now I think we've sometimes had like 16 or 18 people come to those, where originally it was really hard to build any engagement. Yeah.
Okay, Ali, tell us some more examples. You have a few.
Some more examples. Yeah. So I guess I was thinking how sometimes we've started with a kind of issue, and then we've been able to find ways through. So one of the issues that we had was that we found a lot of young people were being referred to come to therapy at the greenhouse, but when it came to it, they didn't want to take up therapy, or they didn't feel they were ready. So we were able to kind of think about that much more creatively. So a really big change that we've been able to do is make our services what we call kind of open at the front door. So from that very first meeting that Gemma was speaking about in the opening, there's an opportunity for people to hear about the different options open to them. So that could be a longer term therapy, a shorter term therapy. It could be joining a filmmaking group. So somebody in the filmmaking group didn't want to start therapy but wanted to find a space to express some of what they'd been experiencing. Equally, we worked out that I think originally we were only able to work with parents if their children were open to our service, but part of what we've learnt so strongly from the parent voice group and from listening to parents through our service is what a total life changer, feeling supported and connected can be for parents. So we've been able to change our system there as well. So we do now work with parents even if their child doesn't want to engage in any other service. And then I guess the third part of that was thinking, well, what might the fears be around therapy or the misconceptions? So we've really tried to be led by young people's voices in terms of, you know, the fear that I'm going to have to sit in a room and tell someone about all the worst things that have ever happened to me. You know, making sure that our website, our resources are really framed and from the voice of a peer rather than from the voice of a professional. And then I guess another one, I think you really spoke to it, Poppy, already, was the thing of hearing really clearly people saying, I want to be in a space with other people who get it, who've been through something similar to me, but I'm not necessarily up for a really heavy conversation or group therapy or something like that. So that's where the Boiling Wells project came from. The Parent Voice Group have been running a monthly Turn Up Tuesday, kind of drop-in craft and coffee session. Lots of examples like that. So yeah, those are some other examples.
Okay, so if we take the focus outside the greenhouse then. This is really important. This is really thinking about how this voice work is being translated externally. And I think it sounds like a lot of work needs to happen within the organisation, establishing these groups, and then taking that step beyond the service itself. So, yeah, any examples of where the greenhouse has made change in relation to systems and services using the greenhouse as a launchpad?
I think just the fact that we're all here and we're talking about mental health and a theme that both the young people and the parents found to be kind of really important to us. I think, Ali, just coming back on what you said there, you know, about working with parents whose children aren't ready or aren't able to take up therapy. If you think about the fact that parents are with their children the majority of the time, whether they're in therapy or not, if the child isn't ready to make that journey, if you can arm the parents and support the parents, the outcome for the young person is going to be better, and in turn is going to reduce demand on your service potentially, or different, or you might be able to provide specialist support on a much more targeted basis. So I think that is such a huge change, because you're left in a vacuum for so long with no support, that actually being able to do that is such a gift, and being able to work with education providers if they pick up the phone, that's a huge change, because we've all seen the impact, and obviously the festival last year was all about education, because after home life, that's where in theory young people will spend most of their time if they're able to, you know, so kind of arming them to have proper trauma-informed conversations or not be scared of having a conversation is such a huge impact. And I think the other thing that the greenhouse does really well is they are connected to so many different services. They're able to have opportunities come into their door, and they kind of know us. They know us really well. They know all of our stories, and so, you know, they can kind of play in the right parent or young person to that environment where they will have the biggest impact. And, you know, parents have spoken to the police, to the justice system, you know, various different bodies along the way, the health services, schools, loads of, I mean, you know better than I do, Ali, but loads of different services, and being able to connect the people with the voice work to the people looking for the voice work, because it's not something you kind of want to volunteer. You don't put a big sign outside your front door saying, come and talk to us, you know, it feels sometimes very right place, right time. So that's a huge...
how we all ended up here. we didn't like all come together and think, let's create a panel. It was, you two had the idea and went, guys, do you wanna sit on a...
No, it was Kate's idea.
Well, yeah, it was your idea, and then you were like, I know someone, and then we were like, hang on, we'll do it as well, and it kind of just...
Grows arms and legs, as
it
these
kind of
things
just
often do.
happened.
I think we really want to celebrate the work of the conference last year and what came from that. Perfect timing. So you would think we planned it. Poppy, tell us a little bit about this.
I love the leaflet, and it's in the
bags, isn't it?
bag,
Yeah.
yeah. And what I love about the leaflet is all the quotes of young people and parents. And I was able to put some of my quotes in, and something that me and Ali did was the Greenhouse School Guidance video. We had about 10 minutes to say what we needed to say about the leaflet, and I was saying why it's so important to have these voices and bringing up some of the key parts of that leaflet, and also how you can use it. I think that's being shown to North Somerset and Bristol safeguarding leads of all the schools, and soon to be more.
Yeah, soon to be South Gloss
Yeah.
and Baines as well. Yeah, so like hundreds of people seeing that.
Yeah. And when I brought it to my school, I kind of gave them suggestions on how to use it, and if you've had a look through it, some of the pages might be good to use like around schools for just like awareness, but also use within teacher training, like trauma training is so important, but also use it for like a basis for when these situations happen, and kind of grow from it and like mould it around each individual situation. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Full circle moment then.
Yeah.
The light bulb. I wish I could take credit for this one, but it's not my own work. It's a story of another parent from the group. So talking about the impact of voice work, taking that school's leaflet and as a parent, trying to advocate for your child is really difficult if you don't have a professional backing you up. You can be dismissed quite easily. It's quite difficult sometimes to explain what you mean. If you don't have the right terminology, it can be really, really difficult. So to hear a story of a parent feeling empowered to go and have a conversation with the school where their child was finding it difficult to access education for various reasons, in the past, that conversation might have been really confrontational and really difficult. So to have something to go in and just say, before we start, could you just read that? And then it result in a really positive meeting, and for that young person to be back in education where we all want them to be. And that's a really powerful. So if it does nothing else, it's helped one person, and that's the power. And the hope is that it goes on to help more people.
Okay, thank you for those great examples of impactful work, in particular in education. Ali, Kate, you might have some other examples as well of stepping outside the sphere of education. Do you want to go?
No, because I can't read it.
And going around working with the police, discussions as example,
was it?
So, no. So I did talk about it earlier.
Yeah.
So just obviously putting people in touch with various different services and talking to the likes of the police to explain how... I don't know, I get the sense that a lot of us feel like there are loads of really good processes out there. There's loads of procedures. Every institution, every service has got a manual for what they should do. But I don't know about you guys, but it feels massively untested when you get to kind of the conversation of going, oh, and this has happened. You get the look of horror and the panic. So being able to kind of talk to those services and say, actually, it wasn't awful, but it could be better. Or do you understand how that comes across? And most people don't want to upset people. They don't want to make it worse. But if they've not been through it, they also don't really understand what we know. So it's
health examples.
Yeah, so I guess it's worth saying sometimes there are sort of things we try and focus on which are priorities of groups of young people or groups of parents, and sometimes we're approached as the greenhouse by other organisations or services with their own priority. So the Bridge, the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, came to us and said they were really seeing that young people weren't returning for a screening, an STI screening. It was really difficult to return. So we did a piece of work with them, really focused on that. And as a result, the young people created a kind of passport that was based all on choice. So, when young people come in probably like one of the worst days of their lives, how can a conversation be had really effectively so that they know the choices that are open to them, the consequences, ideas going forward, again, expressed in the voice of another young person. And as a result, they've seen a really measurable impact on young people coming back for screening. So that's a really lovely win. We got a, British Medical Association Award, the Young People's Voice Group at the time, which was pretty great. And then I guess more generally, just following on what Kate was saying, the Keeping Bristol Safe partnership here has been one of the 3 pilot areas nationally for trying to make a kind of integrated pathway of child sexual abuse services. We know it can get really confusing for families, but also for professionals of kind of who's doing what bit of a journey, and a lot of complexity. So they created a sort of a clearer pathway. But what we were able to do at the launch of that and at various points along the way was to make sure that they didn't lose sight of the kind of texture of an individual experience on that way. So we had a parent who's here today who spoke really eloquently about the journey their family had been through, that on paper had looked like quite a sort of successful outcome, but literally at every single step of the way there'd been these kind of small mistakes made, each of which created so much unnecessary stress. And as a result of speaking that to police, she's then been involved in training Operation Ruby, who are the CSA specialist team at Avon and Somerset. A health service was recommissioned as a result of some of what she'd said. So, really tangible impacts that's partly about us being able to give a platform to these experiences so they are heard. Yeah.
Thank you. Individual change making is extremely demanding, exhausting, challenging. Some people are managing it around busy schedules of work, childcare, family commitments, study commitments, and so on. And this dedication is really worth celebrating. voice work supported by organisations can help to amplify voices, encourage and support change makers and give resources, personal strengths, confidence, connections and a platform just like this one. Madeline, as someone who does this work largely independently, are there examples of change or challenges that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, as Mum mentioned earlier, as Kate, don't know what to call her, she mentioned earlier, the greenhouse have this pool of people around them that go, we want to help out with this. Have you got anyone to help out with this? And one of them was the Keeping Bristol Safe Partnership. He was the head of children's education something. His name's Henry Chan. And I got in touch with him after I did the poetry after the last festival and said, I've got some really rubbish experiences in school. The DSLs, are designated safeguarding needs, are thoroughly unprepared and not necessarily unqualified, but they're not comfortable enough to be dealing with situations like this. And so I decided to push for my poem and my input to be put into the annual designated safeguard lead training, which I had about a 10-minute section as well to create like a worksheet and activities based around my poem, created a case study on myself, but anonymously, and said, here's a really rubbish situation that happened. Here's the profile of the person. How would you then change your approach to dealing with this situation from what happened in the moment, which we'll go into too much detail about that. But, and yes, I think it's about creating choice. Do you want to do it independently? Do you want to do it in a group? And I think the greenhouse have so many resources, but that needs to be extended into other systems as well. It's about either working together or allowing people who want to do it individually to share that without it being a massive burden. It shouldn't be a burden if I come forward or someone comes forward and says, look, I've got some feedback that I think would be really, really helpful. Let's take it, let's do something with it.
Thank you, Madeline. So we've heard of a breadth of activities taking place at the greenhouse and outside the greenhouse, their benefits and the change achievements of these groups. But of course, there's always a perception of risk, and there is some real risk. And I think risk is a major barrier to other sectors and services taking on this type of work and listening to the voices of survivors and supporters. Could you, we'll spend a few minutes on this, Ali. Would you like to highlight some big issues around risk?
Sure, yeah. So this is a really huge issue, and if anybody's here who's kind of embarking on this journey and wants to talk more about it, please come and have a conversation after. So I guess the way that we try and approach it in the greenhouse, and in fact there's a whole panel about risk later on this afternoon, is thinking about essentially choice and relationship as being the kind of foundation. So saying yes, there will be, you could definitely have 100 reasons why it might feel risky to do this kind of work, but trying to be really thoughtful and deliberate about how we approach those challenges and doing it really thoughtfully. So in terms of choice, one of the things that we really try and prioritise is sort of clarity, really clear structures, really clear purpose of spaces and projects, clarity around an agreement that's made. If I'm a facilitator, that I make an agreement with the young person or with the parent, but equally in a group, that we really take time to sort of set those things up and also to revisit them. I'm sure lots of us have been in groups where there's a lot of that at the beginning and then it doesn't really get returned to. So something about that. We sometimes have this conversation about safe spaces, and I guess we're trying to aim for comfortable spaces. I want to do a shout out. I don't know if anyone's here from Bedfordshire University, the Safer Young Lives Research Centre, but they wrote a really fantastic resource called Seeing from Both Sides, which I really recommend. I found it super helpful. It looks at, for example, the issue of triggering, and of course we're having difficult conversations. Of course it's likely that at times we're going to have quite triggered responses to the conversations that happen in our work. So it's saying, the world is really triggering, right? It's hard to be a survivor. So how can we make sure that within the way we set up spaces, we're really thoughtful about, what do you already know about your triggers? What do you know might help you if you're finding something really hard? What can we do afterwards? And having enough resource in the team, enough skill and experience, enough time to be able to really try and hold that and not sort of skim over it. That resource also talks about public identity disclosure, and again, it's just really sort of helpful thinking of a framework so that it's possible, whether that's an adult or a child, to really clearly think with them about like what they want to put into the world, the legacy of that. We have a sort of names policy, but most of it is around thinking, you know, what do you want your words to do out in the world, or what do you want your image to do? I really love, I think that same team, Camille, if she's here, has this great line of participation is protective. I found that really helpful. So if somebody is having a really difficult time, it might well be that they don't want to be, super involved in a million things, but they might still want to participate. And the idea that having that thread of participation and connection itself is protective, rather than us saying, I don't think you're stable enough. It's not the time to get involved in voice work. I mentioned before organisational capacity. I think that's a really huge thing. I've really benefited myself from clinical supervision for this work, like a space to really think about it. Also from peer networks that I'll speak about in a little while. In terms of resource, the other thing for me is that I think good voice work is generative. I think the more times that we meet, the more ideas we have, the more possibilities we see, the more, let's do this, and what about that, and there's an issue with this thing. And in a way, the only limit on that is my time and my colleague Simone's time. So I think if anybody's thinking about kind of developing the voice work in their own service, I guess to really think about that, having enough resource to be able to be responsive and flexible and kind of generate things as they're generated in the minds and ideas of the people you're working with. And then I guess the last one is about the risk of tokenism. So that's always an issue, I think, where people say, we've consulted, and it's all a bit superficial. Particularly in this context, there can be a kind of uncomfortable feeling of like, are we exploiting young people who've already been exploited? Like, are we at the risk of doing that? So again, I think it's really important to think clearly about that. There's a whole question around payment. That's quite a live issue in the greenhouse, and different services have different approaches to it. Our approach generally is to try and make sure that nobody at least is out of pocket for participating in voice, and where we can with specific projects we try to pay. So for example, the time that the young people and parents have given to shaping the festival today, they've been paid for because it's work. And I guess the other thing is around sort of the risk of extraction, is making sure that, of course, often we're tempted to be like, we're thinking of doing this, and what do you think about that, and what do you think about that? But to be conscious of what are we leading as a service, and actually what are the priorities getting generated by the young people and parents working with us, and making sure there's, hopefully at least a bit of a 50-50 split, so that everybody feels like the purpose is one that they're really connected to. And I guess just the last one is the risk of a lot of that expertise or a lot of that focus being held by an individual. Often in organisations, there's only kind of one or two people who do voice work. I think there's something else about trying to share those skills, share those approaches, and also having a kind of more like whole organisation, whole system approach to voice and listening and responding.
Wonderful. Before we move on to engagement, would anyone else like to comment on risk?
I would. I think we've all talked about some really positive examples of what voice work can generate. I think they're really, really difficult conversations to have, and that takes a lot of bravery, not to be defensive or to kind of somebody to say that, as a service, my experience was X, and I think it's important to kind of be brave and lean into it a little bit, but don't let it stop you. Use good practice to manage those risks. I think about the care and attention that we've had from the greenhouse, the checking in after, the, conversations before, the scene setting, the really clear direction. We still achieve great things, but we do it in a safe way. So don't be discouraged from doing it. Just be really mindful and thoughtful about taking care of the people that you're working with, but also the people that are working for you. But don't not do it, is what I'd say.
And those services that are thinking of setting up voice work as part of their service, it's not complaining. That's the whole idea of it. It's not sitting there and going, this was really rubbish, do something about it. It's coming together and thinking, this could be better. This wasn't great. This worked really well. We like this. You know, it's a discussion. And that's how you get to good conclusions, is having a discussion about what worked well, how can we implement those good things across the board. So yes, it's not complaining.
Sometimes it's complaining.
Sometimes it's a little bit complaining. But for the most part, it's not complaining to go away and be like, you should have done that and leave. It's putting that complaint into action to make something of it.
You're willing to roll your sleeves up and do something about it. You're not just coming with a problem and saying, it's now your problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're actually coming with a problem and saying, let us help you solve it.
Let's find a solution.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so thinking then about accessibility. Accessibility to voice work and voice groups by all young people affected by sexual abuse. Ali?
Sure, yeah. So I thought it was interesting that Kate referred to us mouthy ones earlier as like the parent voice group who are really voicing some of this and taking action. I guess there is a challenge, right, of how do we make sure that we're really responding to and kind of harnessing the energy and strength of mouthy ones, but also really trying to listen out for the voices that we might not be hearing. And I think that's the real challenge in this work. So there's this sense of similarity that people have spoken about, kind of being in a space where there's a sense of sort of shared experience. And yet, of course, there's also a lot of different experience, both in terms of the abuse journey that somebody's had or the justice system journey or, other things, but also how that intersects with other parts of them, other experiences they've had, other experiences of oppression or other kinds of abuse. Some people have more of a sense that their voice will be welcome than other people do, right? So trying to be really thoughtful about that. One way that we try and approach that is having these kind of varying opportunities to get involved. So there's a model, sometimes people refer to like the ladder of participation, where the idea is the best kind of participation is at the top. But actually we try and also really value kind of small ways. So if somebody says, I had a client who was like, this corridor's just like weird and boring. It was just like this empty wall on the stairway in the greenhouse building. So it was really nice to be able to like find some art together, get it framed, hang it together. And now we have 2 pictures at the bottom and the top of our staircase. It's like a really small thing, but a tangible thing to then be able to potentially get involved in something else as and when the opportunity arose. In terms of missing voices, we are aware in our service generally, but also in the history of the Voice Project, which has been running for 4 years now, that there are certain voices we don't tend to hear so much from. So, for example, from boys and men, from LGBTQI, queer survivors, from racialised survivors, from survivors with learning disabilities. So there's various things that as an organisation we're trying to do to really be thoughtful and proactive about that, and some of it's about going and connecting with other organisations and other spaces outside of the greenhouse, but some of it's also about, as a whole staff community, trying to be thoughtful and really listen to all of our young people and families, but particularly families and young people that might generally be unheard, to make sure that we're finding opportunities to get them involved in ways that might feel comfortable and right for them. I guess there's also something about practical access. So in the parent voice group, for example, we tend to have parents who have older children just because we meet in the evening and there's childcare constraints. So we've started moving to a more hybrid way of meeting. So people with childcare responsibilities could be at home. We try to cover travel costs. And also relationships kind of more generally. I think in terms of access, I would say my experience at the greenhouse is that a lot of the people who come into our project from our family support service or from therapy often come through, for example, particular therapists who really get this and really, like, in the conversations they might be having in therapy, can see that this is a young person who's have an experience of injustice often, or an experience that they would really like to change, and then really encourage them alongside a therapeutic process to get involved in taking action. And for me, that's when it works really well. So on the one hand, there's something there about building a kind of whole service appreciation of why this work is a really important part of someone's healing and making things better. But secondly, it's about that relationship hopefully being what helps people get over that pretty scary line to come and get involved or speak up. I would say a lot of my time, and I know a lot of my colleague Simone's time, is based on offering, checking in. There's probably about 7 young people and parents who I know really wanted to be here today, but maybe haven't quite managed to come in. But we've done a lot of work of kind of just staying in touch. If they've ever said they're interested in being involved, making sure that they know there's a way they can, with a lot of choice and permission not to, but kind of really needing to kind of value the time and energy of that relationship being what makes a difference often.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Some really great points there. Would anyone like to add before we move on to our next topic?
Anna, you've covered a lot around the sort of the choice of engagement, and I see the evolution of the Greenhouse Voice project has become more thoughtful about that as time's gone on. So it started as just one small group of voices, and actually having that richness, it is really, really important, because if you just did everything according to my experience or Madeline's or Poppy's, or you're capturing some of it, and that's not in vain, but you're not capturing the full spectrum. So I know you're being really thoughtful now about how you develop those groups. So maybe a parent who's, the other parent is the one that's harmed, or sibling on sibling, or talking about peer on peer, which then became such a massive part of the school's booklet, that you kind of need those richness of experience. And if you just have one way to engage, you will get one group of people that are able to. So, we've had parents dial in, haven't we, if we're going to come and then something's happened, as it invariably does, and then they dial in, or, we can't be there tonight, but we can do this, this and this, or, you can write a blog, or you can provide some poetry. So there's loads and loads of different ways, but that's sort of evolved over time. That isn't a day one thing where you've just kind of gone, this is the finished project. It's taken a lot of energy and a lot of learning to be reflective and kind of adapt as you go on. It's not the finished article, and the kind of, my hope is that when I'm kind of spent, I'm like a husk, and there's nothing left to give, that somebody else is going to come along and, kind of take the mantle on, and they'll add their experience, and that'll be different again, and then you'll do different stuff because you've now got somebody else's ideas about what will be helpful. But all of it is cathartic, all of it's important, and all of it contributes to the fact that we can get over the door. We call it the doorstep mile, don't we? Mm-hmm. Walking into a room where you don't know who's on the other side of it is single-handedly the most terrifying thing you can do. So your biggest challenge as a service is to make people feel empowered to come, to share their voice in whatever way that is, and then do something with it. But it's hard, isn't it?
Shall we move on to the next question?
Yes, let's.
So we've got a really big question about translation and translating voice work for survivors into other settings. A question I throw out there is voice work even viable outside organisations where it's held so effectively, like the Greenhouse? And what evidence are we seeing of integration of voice in other institutions, sectors and services? Does it require certain organisational cultures, those that might be characterised by organisational levels of reflexivity, humility, a genuine commitment to improvement? So there have been steps taken by health, social care, justice, policing. I can talk from a research funding angle, and we've seen steps to engage more public and patient voice. But as a highly stigmatised and silenced community, survivors of abuse need patient and public voice groups that authentically represent their interests, and so there are probably specific features of them. Anyway, want to talk about the basic level of providing feedback. Is there anything to add in terms of those mechanisms that allow survivors and their families to input into services? I know it's been touched on by yourselves, but is there anything we want to add to that point?
No, I think just the fact that the mechanisms that are commonly out there is a complaints process.
Yes, which I thought was a very powerful point when you
But
first made that one to me.
It's not a conversation.
No.
That is me going to a service and saying, I don't like what you did. They'll take 20 working days to investigate, and then they'll come back, maybe with an apology, maybe not, but nobody does anything with it. So voice work needs a different setup, if that makes sense. This is exhausting. If you kind of thought about how many services intersected all of our journeys, and there are things that go wrong in all of them, not always intentionally, stuff just happens. If you had to complain to all of them, that's a lot of 20 working days that you've got when what I want to be doing is focusing on her.
Yes.
And us. I
Clearing
don't
up
want
the
to be...
fallout.
Yeah, clearing up the fallout. You don't want to be angry all the time, because that's what complaining makes you. It makes you angry. And actually, to be productive, you don't want to be angry.
Yes, I understand. Madeline, what about the steps you've taken to create voice spaces? I think you've tried to do this in education, and what was the outcome of that?
So actually, I used my poem last year to launch a project in my school, to create, it was a 3-step programme, but the main one was when the height of my struggling in school, I was promised a designated room, space, whatever it was, that if I was panicking that badly that I had to run out the classroom, I know that I could rock up to that room and no one would... I was always very self-soothing, so it wasn't I needed the support from a physical member of staff. I just needed a room to be away from everyone, and they promised and promised and promised, and it never happened. So when I hit sixth form, I thought, I'm done, because that's not fair. So I went to them and I said, look, you've just appointed a new mental health rep person, whatever you decide to call it, with a budget. This is the first thing that needs to be done. And this isn't just going to help people who suffer with trauma or PTSD. It's gonna help everybody in that school who had a bad grade on their maths test or whatever the problem may be. If they're struggling, they can go to that space. Now, I sat down with the head teacher, I sat down with the designated safeguarding lead, and everyone went, yes, 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 tick box, this is great, this is brilliant, this is exactly what we need. We've got the room, we've got the budget, let's do it. Come back a couple of weeks and I'm like, you said you were going to email me. As we said before, returning to the conversations is absolutely vital, and I was the one chasing constantly. I was at that sixth form for 2 years, and I'd been in that school for 7 years prior, and it effectively felt like a checkbox exercise for them to sit down with me and say, let's do this project. And I think that's really gutting, because the school schools preach so highly about protecting their students, creating a community, keeping people in school, especially with the new education guidance saying we need people to be in school. The way to do that isn't just get into school, it's here, we've heard your advice, here's how we're going to implement it, so you don't have to worry anymore. You are going to be protected, you are going to be safe, and it just leaves survivors feeling really discouraged.
Thank you, Madeline.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Poppy, I think you have a slightly more positive experience to share about, and we'll try and balance the two sides. So tell us about your experience, please.
So I'm part of something called YRAP, which was the Young Researchers Advisory Panel, which was created and it's funded by the University of Bedfordshire. And basically this panel is a group of young people that have experienced some kind of violence, and it's used for companies to come for consultations. Like, for example, we had Dartington Research Team, which came to the panel, and they displayed this research they had done on how services can have an impact on young people after violence, and going to them about it. And basically, they showed us their findings, and us as young people were able to use our voices to add to that research, but also make sure that their findings were viable, like that they would come up again and again. Instead of it being someone talking for these young people, it was checked, and it is from young people. And they're bringing that to the Department of Education. So with YRAP checking it, they have a more solid chunk of research. But also, the panel's used to do a small research project as well. As young people, we're going to do research for ourselves. And what they're doing is, with the funding, we're able to learn about how to conduct a research project, and they're basically giving us skills with our experience to make us that much more valuable and able to use our experience for something and be able to display what we found, things like that.
Fantastic.
Very positive.
Thank you, Poppy. Thank you. Okay, so we've heard some examples of things working well and others of things not working so well. I am keen, I'm sure we all are, keen to hear of any examples from our audience about, if you'd like to share some best practice, in particular any of that good practice that's happening outside the charity sector. So if you've experiences in health, justice, policing and so on, there'll be a moment to share about that at the end, but maybe start to have a think about that. And Grace, perhaps we can pop the QR code back up on the screen so you'll be able to share anonymously as well if you'd like to ask a question. But Ali, joining forces with other agencies and sharing knowledge and resources feels like an important step given where we are. There's still a lot of work to do. Can you speak to any initiatives here at the Greenhouse for achieving this?
Yeah, so I guess it makes me think of two things. So one is about trying to connect with other child sexual abuse services who are either developing voice work or interested in beginning to. So we set up, I think, end of 2023, what's called the CSA Voice Network. So it's about 8 organisations and 2 research institutions, and we meet every 2 months, quite informally, really. And essentially exchange kind of dilemmas and learning and new initiatives. For me, I just really needed that when I started in this work, because I was in a team of essentially therapists and social workers and really wanted to have peers to think about what was coming up and how to do it better, basically. So that's been a really helpful development for me. And if anybody would like to be part of that, again, get in touch afterwards. Also through that, it's meant that we've been able to connect. So one of the Beyond Therapy Shapers is part of the U group in Cornwall, so has come up today and met everyone else in person for the first time, having worked on this project since September, which is really amazing. So to be able to work and connect young people kind of nationally and not just locally, that's one of the hopes for that project going forward, to sort of amplify further. I guess the other thing, like you're saying, there is a kind of uplift at the moment across lots of services of sort of trying to hear from lived experience voice. And yet we know that there's something often quite specific about the experiences of survivors. So I think going forward, something I'd really like to see for the Greenhouse is us helping kind of bridge opportunities so that survivors' experiences do get heard, for example, in CAMS, or for example, CAMS is a good example, isn't it, when we think about mental health. So being able to kind of use our platform, use our networks, to be able to make sure that voices do get heard and get heard by people who can make changes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ali. So we are now ready. Do we feel ready for questions from the audience? Shall we put it back on them for a little while?
Yes, let's do that.
Excellent. So we have our first question up here, but obviously feel free to just speak out as well from where you are. What one thing can services do to enable the stepping over the doorstep challenges that have been mentioned to create greater engagement with supporters, parents and young people? Any thoughts, panellists?
I do. I think it's quite basic. I think these services just need to have empathy and treat these people as other people instead of viewing it as, say for a police setting or a teacher setting, there's a big divide of power. Just view them as people and be empathetic about their situation, be human.
Yeah, very similar viewpoint. We were talking about this when we, as a 5, first met and said choice and empathy, because this person that you're meeting has already gone through one of the most horrible experiences that a person can go through. Don't meet it with aggression and don't make them not feel human. They're still a person, and that is the worst thing you can do. Just choice and empathy.
Wonderful. Okay. Have we got another question, I wonder? We may not, we won't have time for all of them, I'm afraid, but let's have a look at the next one. So how do you deal with conflict or disagreements in the voice work? Big one. We don't have any.
I don't have any.
Genuinely, I don't think we've disagreed, have we, Ali? Apart from with timekeeping.
I think these guys tease me because my timekeeping is sometimes a bit to be desired. I guess I feel like sometimes conflicts come up in the group, but more often they might come up in the conversations outside of the group. So people saying, you know, I felt it was hard to speak there, or I didn't like the structure of that, or what this person said was really triggering. I don't want to shut them down, but actually I find it quite hard to be in a group with them. So I guess some of that is about, again, having the kind of resource and time to be able to really respond to those and to sort of try and think carefully about it, if necessary, with kind of both sides. I think some of it, again, like I said before, is about establishing really clear parameters at the beginning and then revisiting them. And I know, like recently, I had an experience where I thought that was really clearly set up, and then somebody in the group really disagreed and sort of felt like we did something that we hadn't agreed to do. So that's really important to then have that conversation and kind of go, you know, was it not written clearly enough? Did we understand different things by that? What did you need that we weren't offering, to try and make sure that we can kind of repair? I guess like in any work, right? There's sort of rupture and repair, and I think this kind of really high stakes, important emotional work is going to have that like any other.
Okay, wonderful. Going to have to put the rest of the questions on hold. I'm going to invite, if anyone in the audience would like to share about some good practice that they've been engaged with, we'd love to hear. Any examples?
Pasta pressing.
It is a little alarming, isn't it? Perhaps you'd like to come and talk to us afterwards, that's fine. I think we could do another question from here then, yeah. Can we be a part of the greenhouse from another city?
So currently not. I'm looking at Gemma. Maybe that's the next stage. I mean, like I say, what was so lovely about this particular project of shaping the festival was that we were able to work with young people from outside of Avon and Somerset. And I guess going forward, how cool would that be to be able to sort of build a movement and a bigger network where that whole question of isolation, that kind of traverses geography as well. But currently, I would say if you are here and you're from somewhere else and you want to get involved in projects like this, you could always give us your details and we can try and connect you either with a local service, or if in the future we do something like this at a sort of bigger scale, you know, we'd love to find a way to have you involved or help you find a way to get involved in stuff you care about.
This kind of work is only possible because of incredible funders who enable us flexibility and our statutory commissioning, and also unrestricted funding. And we have just had some incredible funding come through. So for the first year of that funding from Paul Hamlin, we will be focusing on local work, and in the second year, the year after, you will see us all around the country operating these spaces with many of the partners here today.
Well said. Thank you, Jen. Okay, so I have about 3 more tasks I'm trying to juggle in the last 6 minutes, so bear with me, please. With regard to these last few questions, please come and we can look at them together afterwards, yeah, and we can respond then. I'm going to invite my panellists to conclude with a word, a phrase, or a metaphor that conveys your experiences of voice work. So you be thinking about those.
Oh, I've got it.
As if you haven't got them already. And at the simultaneously, I'm going to invite the audience to use our Mentimeter to share a word that reflects how you're thinking about voice work now, irrespective of how you're coming to it. Maybe you've never done it before, or maybe you're very experienced in this area. But what's the word to capture how you're thinking about voice work? Okay, and then back to you guys. So, Kate, we'll start with you.
Okay, my phrase is more choice with a louder voice.
Beautiful.
You will not go quietly.
Well done, well said.
Mine's those with the ability have the responsibility.
Lovely.
Mine's more about like starting the push. Like my mum always says, if no one says or does anything, then nothing will change. So kind of voice work is getting the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm. Lovely, thank you. And we have all the words coming from our audience here behind as well. Lovely to see it moving. And Ali, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I realised this was one I hadn't thought about. So I'm suddenly like, oh. I think like you count and you have power. Let's find ways to use it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm hoping to share a video in just a moment. It's relating to upfront survivors, and this is a project that Gemma, Grace and I have been involved in, and obviously is part of this festival as well. And Grace and I have been leading on the research side of that to look at people's experiences of being a part of upfront survivors. And in fact, that includes probably several people in the room who, that have attended this festival, or have done the creative leaders training, or been part of a national change group, or finding the words. And what we did with the research, we did interviews with 20 people, and we created narratives around each person's individual experience. And then we asked Jemima Foxtrot, who's a poet, to work with the words that were contained in the narrative, so the words of the participants, to reflect the impact of that programme on the participants. Hopefully that makes sense. So we'll play that out at the very end. But before we get to that, I want to say some thanks. I want to express my gratitude, and I think on behalf of the group as well, to Beyond Therapy, to the Shapers Group and to the Greenhouse for making space for this important topic. I want to say thanks to our audience for your engagement and participation. We will get to your questions eventually afterwards. And I want to end by acknowledging the survivors and the families who are building this vital knowledge. And I want to commend the strength and courage of my panellists, my co-panellists, for sitting here and sharing with us all this experience that you have gone through. Yes, and it's been really powerful. Great privilege for me to get to know you through this project, or this process, and I hope you have learned something from hearing all of this today. Roll it, James. Will it be the right one?
I have a lot of old stories, loops in my head. It's very hard to hold myself, hold my head up sometimes. I'd been made to shut up, unseen and unheard. Trauma locked away, unseen and unheard. I'm tired of carrying my bag of shame. I was not allowed to speak as a child. I was not allowed to express my feelings, my dreams, my thoughts. Through all my teenage years, I thought I was the bad guy. I didn't have a lot of friends. I felt a lot of shame. I didn't talk about it. I felt like it was my fault. I have not known how to love myself. I've been very harsh with myself. I'd always been the outsider. I'm tired of carrying my bag of shame. I'm always looking for something. Amongst all this trauma and turmoil, you want to detach somehow, distract from it, use it for something meaningful, positive. I think I'm always looking for something. I've been on this massive journey. There's a journey people go on. I avoid having expectations, my defence against being let down. I've never been with a group of survivors before. I'd never seen an opportunity for child sexual abuse survivors before. For many of us, it's the first time we ever stepped into a room with other survivors. My first time being with a group of survivors. The first time that I've been in a room with so many survivors. I never imagined walking into a space like that, where everybody instantly knows that about you, and you know that about everyone else. There's something so special about that. An invisible gold thread that suddenly went through all of us. The power of being in a room and just being is huge. Everybody just gets it. We're all in this together. It didn't matter what colour you are. It doesn't matter what shape you are. It doesn't matter how well you are. A shared understanding. That is such a relief. I could actually feel shameless, a unique and special place where we all have permission to speak from the heart. Creativity is important to me. I remember writing poems, literally finding my words. There's no pressure. You can't fail at this. I could pour my heart out with colour and gesture, like having a secret language to tell your story in a different way, and you have the choice of how much you share. It's okay for your creativity to be messy, that freedom to actually just do. You're not worried about the end result. It's just for the sheer joy of it, a sense of power and owning it, taking something bad and turning it into art, into something beautiful. Creativity is like an outlet and can spill into every part of your life. We need art, we need music, we need dance, we need performance, we need writing. Creativity is the mechanism, one of the tools in the toolbox. Creative expression is like a life force, as important as breathing, and there's a joy in it, connection in it. When you make something into art, you're causing people to look at it. And I've been really proud of the things that I wrote. This community is making me realise that I'm not broken. It's a community I want to be a part of, feeling seen, feeling visible. A community to support one another. That tribe feels respectful, thoughtful, caring, loving. It solidified in my head that I wasn't alone. We completely bonded. I made some good friends. We still have the group. I felt like I belonged. There was this whole protective shell, this holding. The change has been so immense, transformational. I'm a different person now. I feel much more settled in myself. I think I'm a bit more mature, a bit more open now. I've learnt that I'm worthy, I'm quirky. The ease with which I say I'm a survivor, absolutely changed, has given me enormous confidence. Like I had my cup filled up. Now I feel like a cherry blossom tree, really confident and shining. It gave me a raft to float above the turbulence. It has taken all of the shame and all of the sting. It's helped me find the fire in my belly. I was already on this journey of acceptance. This has kicked it into the stratosphere. It's been healing. Hope is the word. I'm finding my voice. I must speak. You have a voice and it's worth using it. It's helped me turn the volume up.